It's time for the unex news. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Unex News Podcast, Margie Kay.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining me this evening. I'm Margie Kay, and this is Unex News. Tonight, we are talking about mass sightings around the world, specifically in the United States in several locations. I'm sure you've heard about this. It's actually gone viral. There are a lot of videos out there and still photos of these things that are occurring. And I do have a special guest this evening. He will be joining me in just a moment. First, I'm going to play two very short special reports that I did just recently. This is an Unex News special report. The FBI is investigating mysterious drones over New Jersey. Mysterious drones have been spotted flying in formation across northern New Jersey skies for the past 2 weeks, local authorities confirmed Monday, causing concern among residents who are disturbed by these bright, unexplained aerial objects that appear regularly during nighttime hours. The Morris County Sheriff's Department and FBI are currently examining these aerial sightings, which, while causing disturbance, haven't posed any concrete safety risks yet, officials stated. Currently, there's no immediate threat to public safety, according to Morris County Sheriff James Gannon's statement, and the Sheriff's Office is collaborating with numerous law enforcement agencies to investigate this situation. Local Morris County resident Julie Chevalier expressed how these puzzling aerial displays have disrupted her sleep. Everyone's extremely disturbed, she explained to NBC News on Tuesday. Sleep eluded me last night. Chevalier expressed concerns about future sleepless nights ahead. Checking my window at 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., they remained stationary in the air, she continued. When I woke at 5:30 a.m. this morning, they were still visible as daylight approached. They retreated in their original direction, and I'm certain they'll return once darkness falls again. The aerial appearances began in mid-November and have continued nightly. These objects appear every night with the exception of Thanksgiving. Apparently, they took a holiday, local resident Mike Walsh informed the news outlet on Monday. This aerial activity has captured FBI attention, particularly given their responsibility to protect federal officials. Morris County's location just north of Somerset County, where Trump National Golf Club Bedminster serves as a frequent overnight destination for President-elect Donald Trump, adds significance to the situation. We're coordinating with state and local authorities regarding the reported drone activity, a representative from the FBI stated. And the FBI would also like assistance from the public with this matter, so you can call them if you are able. And there is a blog about this incident on the Unex Network website at unexnetwork.com. This has been a special report. I'm Margie Kay. And now here is the second report. Welcome to this Unex News special report. This week, a viral video shows UFOs over the Capitol. Multiple unidentified objects were captured hovering above the U.S. Capitol this week, causing concerns that aliens could be plotting a takeover. The viral photograph exhibits 4 bright lights eerily positioned just a few feet above the Statue of Freedom atop the Capitol dome, and was taken by Dennis Diggins, a former U.S. Air Force pilot and licensed tour guide. The lights changed position from a square to a straight line in the video. Another video taken from a further distance appeared to confirm the occurrence with a view of 6 twinkling lights moving independently at various altitudes. The images quickly triggered panic on social media, which was further amplified due to the fact that it occurred just weeks after a congressional hearing discussing alleged covert government programs involving extraterrestrial spacecraft. It's already happening, wrote one user. This is unbelievable, wrote another. One debunker claimed that the lights are lens flares. However, people saw them with the naked eye, and lens flares follow camera movement, which these did not. Unex is having the videos analyzed by experts, and we will let you know what the results are. The sighting emerged after the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives held a hearing with witnesses discussing alleged secret retrieval programs, communication with non-human intelligence, and government intimidation of whistleblowers. This hearing took place after the Pentagon released a report in March stating that they had found no evidence of extraterrestrial spacecraft. And here I am going to show you one of the photographs that were taken, and this is from a video. This is online. It's also linked up in our blog article on this subject. And here you see the Capitol building with 4 lights over the top. And then in the other video, it actually states that it is 4 lights, but it is not. It is 6 lights that are moving independently in the video. This has been an Unex News special report. I'm Margie Kay. Okay, so that is our subject matter for this evening. To this Unex News. Oh, hold on report. Just one moment. It decided to play itself again. Okay, we've got a ghost in the machine this evening. My guest this evening is Ray Graham. He serves as a MUFON field investigator and chief historian for the Missouri MUFON chapter. He's a retired U.S. Army colonel who joined MUFON in 2023 after having his own firsthand UFO sighting. Ray has done extensive research for the chapter, and 2 of his articles have been published in Unex magazine. Ray and his wife, Diane, live in Liberty, Missouri. They are empty nesters who travel extensively investigating UFOs along the way. Welcome to the show, Ray.
Hi, Margie. I'm having a little bit of audio issues, but hopefully we can work through that. Pleasure to be with you today.
Okay, I'm glad you could join me. Were you able to hear those first 2 reports about what's going on in the skies over the U.S.?
I just heard your portion on the drone sightings, and I'll offer a little bit based on my military background and my short time as a field investigator.
Okay.
When we talk about these drones, when a common reference to a drone or unmanned aerial vehicle is that they're small and generally not piloted by a human pilot. So it's an easy slang to say if it's a little object, it's probably a drone because it doesn't have a pilot in it. I'm going to give you 5 quick reasons that these are not drones. The first one is drones are loud. Any drone under about 55 pounds is generally a quadcopter with 4 propeller blades, and they're extremely loud, and they're very, very obvious in the sky. The second one is they're very slow. The idea behind a drone is that they're flying surveillance in a pattern. They're looking down, and you want it to fly slow because if it was a jet aircraft, it's flown through the area so fast, it doesn't have time to loiter over that area and to take the videos. So they're generally slow and not very maneuverable. The loiter time I just referenced, generally a drone can only stay in the air a short period of time until it either runs out of battery power or it runs out of fuel. So the small drones that I have, I get maybe 18 minutes of flying time. The much larger ones can fly longer, obviously. But when we're talking about drones that are hovering over an area for 3 or 4 or 5 hours, they're really not commercial drones that are commonly known to be able to do that. The fourth thing is they're vulnerable. It's easy to disrupt a drone's flight either by breaking the signal to the sending unit on the person that's controlling it, or destroying the drone because they're not armored. They don't really have much protection either a device to scatter the signal, or even a laser that can disrupt their motors or their camera body or their battery will destroy it. And then the last one is the range. Any of these objects, when we hear about them off the coast of the U.S. and they've flown in and they're over a U.S. military base, they had to come from somewhere. So either they were launched from a submarine that surfaced offshore, which is possible, but unlikely. They don't have the range to fly in from a very long distance away and loiter over an area for an extended time. So based on those 5 things, I'm going to say these are UAP and not drones.
Okay, well, that brings up a good point, because we did some research here in my office and found that there is an air base right there, right next to where the drones are being sighted. And in the past, that air base, their study, they were studying and running testing on unmanned vehicles, experimental vehicles. So the first thing that I thought was, just based on the video that's been taken and the people watching them, was these are some type of experimental drone that's something of ours. But then when they talk about them being in the air all night long, and in some staying in this exact same position, some of these witnesses are looking out their windows of their home, and right next to their property is a drone hovering in the same place for hours on end. And that doesn't sound like a drone to me either, because, I don't know how long the charge is, but with some of them being the size of a Volkswagen bus, that brings into question, is it manned or not? And where the heck are they? Or are they possibly Chinese spy drones or Russian spy drones? Or, would our military run a test like that would, in order to just see what people's reactions are? That's another theory. What do you think about that? Can you hear me, Ray?
Yes, but it's breaking up, so I'm getting about half of what you're saying, but I'm rolling with where you're coming from. Yeah, the size of the drone itself has a lot to do with the payload and how much it can carry, and then what can it do. So if it's going to be an armed drone and it has explosives or something like that, it is obviously much larger, and it has a larger payload. So those are generally drones that are over 55 pounds, and they're fixed wing, and they look like an airplane more than a quadcopter. And our largest drones, like the Global Hawk, is actually a jet, where it can fly to the objective area. It can mid-air refuel on the way there. When it gets to the objective area, the control of that drone is turned over to somebody in a little pod somewhere, and they take control of it physically through their headset and through their pod setup. And then they can engage targets, they can film video, they can laze targets, they can perform different missions. And then before the drone comes back home again, it gets turned back over, and it flies back remotely under its own control.
I see you've had some experience with drones. Needless to say. Okay. So what we're going to do right now, we are going to take a short break, and I'm going to ask Ray to disconnect and then reconnect to try to get some better sound while we're doing that. So let me, just before we go to the break, be sure you get a hold of this 2025 unex Network calendar, which is available on the website at unexnetwork.com. They make good holiday gifts, so get one for yourself and some for some friends. We also have, of course, the Anti-Mothman t-shirt. That's guaranteed to repel Mothman. We do still have a few of those. So I'm going to bump Ray, and I'm going to ask him to reconnect. And we'll be back right after this. Debbie Ziegelmeyer is an experienced diver, dive trainer, and UFO investigator who has researched sites around the world that have water-related UFO activity. now know that even the Pentagon admits that there are unknown objects in the skies and underwater around the world. Debbie compiled an amazing book to catalog many of these sightings. The Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways, a reference guide to UFO, USO, water-related activity, has received rave reviews by UFO researchers and the public. The book is available at Amazon.com.
Ray Hobbs here for the Unex Network as we present a health and wellness, spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. They apply Cathara energy work with all of their plants and products. All of their products are made in small batches and third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farms Topical Salve. It comes in 1 ounce and half-ounce sizes made with all natural ingredients. And from now until January 2nd, use promo code KUNX Holiday for an additional 15% off all CBD products. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Unex Network website at unexnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com. Promo code KUNX Holiday.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Margie Kay, and this is on Next News. We're talking about mass sightings around the world this evening. On Wednesday, the Daily Mail released recordings of perplexed pilots describing unusual phenomena in the airspace to flight controllers. We've been tracking these 2 lights hovering above us, moving side to side and alternating directions for approximately 30 minutes now, an American Airlines pilot reports in the recording. The report indicates that a Spirit Airlines crew member witnessed something similar. The air traffic controller, however, was unable to verify these sightings. His monitoring equipment showed nothing unusual. Fort Worth ATC reached out to the U.S. Air Force regarding potential activity across 2 adjacent military operation areas following the pilot's request, but radar confirmed no aircraft were present in either MOA that evening. The article also notes that footage captured near Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport during the same evening as the puzzled pilot communications shows luminous objects dropping from above. These recordings quickly spread across Reddit, TikTok, and various social platforms, prompting viewers to question what they were witnessing, similar to the pilot's reactions. Both flights proceeded normally afterward, and no additional information has emerged about what the pilots may have observed. Following their 30-minute UFO observation, this American Airlines flight touched down at Dallas-Fort Worth approximately 9:42 local time. And I do have that recording. I'm going to play that now, and this is the pilot recording.
113, get a question. Go ahead. If the river's MOA is hot, you got anybody mess around over there? It is cold. Well, I was curious why you asked. You sound a little weird, but we keep asking about the MOAs, we keep asking, because we're following these 2 kind of lights that are up above us that are kind of jogging back and forth left and right for the past like half an hour. Really? Yeah, I don't see anything on radar. No, river's just not active. Cool, thanks. And 67, we've been watching them for about an hour or 2 in the northwest skies. Everywhere, we as well. Way up high. What position they actually moved? It's the first time I've seen them change relative positions. That's weird. Are they way up high? Northwest? Sorry, Bucky, you say they're close in to you or they're up high? Oh, I put them about 100 miles out in space. Gotcha. Agreed.
So that was the pilot recording from the American Airlines flight. What do you make of that, Ray? It's not too often that we get to hear something like that.
It's pretty compelling. It really is. The fact that these pilots, they can speak on an emergency frequency and aircraft that are around them that's not publicly broadcast. And so a lot of times those conversations will be candid and maybe sometimes a bit profane and off guard, as the pilots are just as surprised as anybody else would be to see some of these objects in the air. So very interesting presentation.
I thought they sounded a little too calm, and if that's not the first time they've seen anything like that, which of course is a good possibility that is the case. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes putting on your game face and being professional when inside you might be totally and their many years of experience. They're just well trained to deal with unusual situations on the fly, and that may be an example of that.
Okay, so you are cutting out, which is really unusual. The only thing that I can figure is if you've got anything else on in the home, like streaming video or anything like that on your internet that might be taking bandwidth away, that might be why you're breaking up a bit. So I don't know if you can address that or not. But Ray, you got interested. I want to hear your story about how you got interested in UFOs because you had your own sighting in 2023. How did that happen?
Okay, well, I have been interested in the topic since I was a kid. I read science fiction books and things like that, the science fiction movies and things like that. So I found it an interesting subject, and I thought that there was truly a possibility that UFOs were a real thing, but I didn't know for sure. In September of 2023, my wife and I were on a Viking ocean cruise, and we were coming down the English Channel to the south, and we were right in the middle of the channel. We were about 80 miles from anything. We could briefly see oil rigs that were out in the ocean and just remotely doing oil processing, and some occasional helicopters landing on those tankers. But other than that, nothing out there at all in the middle of the ocean. The sky was clear. It was the evening. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening. It had just started to get dark. And my wife and some friends were going to go down to the club on the ship, and I didn't want to go. So I decided I would just sit out on the balcony on the cruise ship. And sitting on the balcony looking up into the sky, I saw one white dot in the sky, and it was about the size of a bright star. So I didn't really think that much of it. What struck me is it was the only thing that I saw. And so I sat there and watched it for a couple of minutes. And then as I watched it, it slowly started to make strange maneuvers. And it wasn't real fast, but it was angular, and it was very, very pronounced. I had my iPad with me. I picked up my iPad. I had the Night Sky app, and I turned the Night Sky app on because I wanted to make sure I wasn't seeing some celestial object. Mm-hmm. And as I picked up my iPad and pointed it at the object, the iPad started going crazy. The screen was opening and closing. It looked like people were trying to open applications and close things, and I couldn't control the iPad. Wow. I finally set that down, and I pulled out my phone, and I started to video with my phone. And I got a couple of short clips, none that I have loaded where I can show you now, but it was that continual motion. And this went on for about 3 hours. And so my wife and her friends came back from the bar on the ship. They came out on the balcony, and all three of them also saw the object as I was watching it. They went back inside, and right before this thing left, it moved up to the corner of my vision, and it stretched out into a long white line, and then two red balls formed on the end of this. And it stayed like that for about 30 seconds. And then it just came back together. It turned back into, this time, it had been white and a yellowish white most of the time. But now, when those red balls came back together, it formed into like a glowing orange and then shot abruptly off. 3 hours. I was watching a podcast. It may have been Jeremy Corbell, and he was talking about if you're watching all these shows and you're really interested in all this stuff, you can either just watch it and be entertained, or you can get off the couch and get involved. So I decided to get off the couch and get involved and join MUFON as a field investigator.
Yes, you did, and you've been heavily involved right from the get-go, because in Missouri we're constantly busy with UFO sightings. It's a very, very busy state, but things have picked up as of late. There have been a lot more sightings, and I checked nationwide and worldwide, and that is indeed the fact. Worldwide, the sightings have picked up in pace. In fact, I know that from Thanksgiving to December the 3rd, there were over 100 sightings reported, and that was only to one UFO reporting site. So, and there are several. So things are picking up. One has to wonder why that might be. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, for one thing, I think the prolific expansion of video and cameras, and everybody has a camera in their pocket now. I think that there is a lot of momentum for sightings that would not previously be taken seriously because it was only verbal. And I think there was a very valid campaign to suppress what people were saying that they saw, and taking advantage of the fact that they didn't have evidence. So now when they can pull out their phone or they can pull out a video, it makes a tremendous amount of difference. And as we have investigators, we also have a photo analysis team that analyzes these videos, and they go into great depth to take these videos apart and to take these photos apart and to do very, very detailed analysis of what that is. And like you talked earlier about lens flares and things like that, about 90% of the time, we can find a logical explanation, but about 10 to maybe 15% we can't. And if we determine that we can't explain it prosaically and we believe it's a UFO, MUFON will call that an unknown. And our percentage in MUFON has pretty consistently been around the 20% range for the last several years. And those statistics go back as far as Project Blue Book and other UFO organizations that have existed in the past. It's always about that 10, 15, maybe 20% that we can't explain. And then as we have people try and explain to us why what we saw was an ordinary object, they always bring up the ones that can be explained, the obvious ones, the ones that there's a clear explanation, and not so much about that 10% that they don't know. So
no, they never talk about that. They never talk about that. But that brings me to our next chapter here, and that is you've done some investigating on several cases. You have some favorite cases. What are a couple of your best cases that you've worked on? And can you tell us about those?
I can. So there are two things that come to mind. The first one is about a month and a half ago, my wife and I decided to make a road trip out to Skinwalker Ranch. So anybody who's ever been interested in UFOs, especially in the last couple of years, has probably seen the show. But from an investigator's perspective, it's a real thing. There are valid reasons that is a legitimate place to study. There's been a lot of activity that's been studied there. The Native Americans have talked about these objects and creatures and cryptids and skinwalkers for hundreds of years. So this is not a new phenomenon. And when we went out there, it was interesting that the Native Americans, they don't really understand why we have this big separation between these two things, and UFOs and everyday life. For them, it's part of their world. It's part of their reality. It's not something unusual. And from those that I talked to, virtually everyone has seen these orbs, and it's a common occurrence that they don't really even talk about it very much. So we decided, where we stayed with a friend, we went on to Moab as a stopover point. Visited Arches National Park and some of the points there, and then we stayed at a place called Ken's Lake Campground, which was just south of Moab. So, as a UFO investigator, I have to be totally honest that when we talk to witnesses, one of the questions that we're asking them is, what's your interest in this? What were you doing when this happened? So if the person is a total skeptic and they've never seen anything, that's a good witness because they have no preconceived ideas and they have no agenda. So I'll be honest that I went out there with an agenda. I was a UFO investigator and I was looking for UFOs, but I didn't know what I would find. So at the campground in Moab, I had taken quite a bit of gear. I had night vision gear, forward-looking infrared, tri-field meters, several different devices. And I was taking these out and getting them set up. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw a small red light, and it was just moving up and down very, very slightly. But the motion is what caught my eye. So I looked up and I saw an object. I was thinking, well, I'm just getting set up. How could I already see something? I'm not even set up yet. But sure enough, it was an object in the sky. And I called my wife. She came out of the tent with her iPhone. So I've taken all this gear with me, and none of it's set up and none of it's ready yet. So she started to snap pictures with her phone. And so she took several pictures. And some of the pictures, because they weren't stabilized on a tripod, there was some motion in the frame and some stars were blurred. But on the fourth picture she took, she captured a very clear image of an object in the sky. And it looks like a stoplight with the light in the middle where it would normally be a yellow light on a stoplight. This one is red and octagonal, and then a white light above and below. And so generally shaped like a stoplight, like a traffic light, but black and looking somewhat organic. And so we both saw the object. And then after maybe less than a minute, it just dissolved and was gone. So we didn't see any motion of flying away or anything like that. It was the MUFON photo analysis team did analysis on it. So I was an eyewitness. My wife was a firsthand witness. And from the video, even though it wasn't a MUFON case, if it was a MUFON case and I was the investigator, I would have determined that that was an unknown or a UFO. So it was very compelling. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind what I saw. It wasn't like a little ball that could be misconstrued. It was very obvious. And then we went from there to Skinwalker Ranch, which is in Fort Duchesne, Utah, on the northeastern corner, right by the border of Colorado. And we spent a couple of nights at a campground that was right next to Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, it's as close as you can camp to Skinwalker Ranch. It's called the UFO Valley Campground. And we camped there for a couple nights, and they were doing experiments on Skinwalker Ranch while we were there. And so the lady that ran this campground had a tour, and so she took us with an all-terrain vehicle up on the mesa on the top of Skinwalker Ranch. So Skinwalker Mesa, it's a 4,000-acre mesa that she leases just to do these tours. So we're driving around up on this mesa, looking down over the mesa, and we're looking down at the Triangle and Homestead 2 and the command center and the helipad, and Jeeps driving by and little all-terrain vehicles. And then we could see the area in the field where they were setting up to do experiments. And both nights we were there, they conducted experiments. And I got a couple of snippets that are captured on video. I don't know if you even want to try to bring those up with my bandwidth issue, but I did get a couple of brief videos, not near as compelling as the Moab case, but still interesting.
Yeah, let's go ahead and give it a shot. See if you can share screen and show something.
All
Yeah, hopefully it'll work.
right, we're gonna.
Okay, Ray is trying to share screen right now with us. And boy, the chat room is busy. If you have any questions about anything or comments, go ahead and put that in the chat. This one's from Misfire Jack. If witnesses are most believable when they don't have an agenda, then how can we believe you? That's good. I guess you don't know who to believe, right? It's just, relating our own experiences here. It's Ray is doing right now. I've had
Margie, we might have to do that on a future episode.
Okay.
This is the first time using this StreamYard, and I may have to get reconfigured before we do this.
Okay. So we'll, or maybe I can drop them in later and then just republish this, so we can perhaps trying that. The Moab, what you're calling the Moab monolith, that photo that your wife got, and especially after it was cleaned up, is one of the strangest looking objects I've ever seen. And I'm sure that every ufologist is going to say the same thing. It was just bizarre looking. It's not like a typical UFO, but here it is hovering in the sky. Just crazy. Did either one of you have any sense of like a vibration or any sounds, or that presence of something when you feel that something's nearby even though you can't see it? Did you have any of those sensations?
No, I didn't, and neither did my wife. But I believe in that possibility for sure. When we saw the object on the cruise ship in September of 23, only about a month and a half later, when we got home, on our balcony in Liberty, we saw another orb that it was almost exactly the same. And never in my life had I ever seen a UFO before. And then a month and a half after we saw this on the cruise ship, we saw another one almost exactly like it over Liberty. So I remember thinking, and I think I might have mentioned to you, I'm not really sure if I brought something home with me or not. But so
I think you did, right?
I'm not freaked out about it or anything. But so, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't brought anything home from Skinwalker Ranch, but it's only been about 6 weeks.
Well, you know that old saying, when you notice them, they notice that you notice them, and they notice you. I don't know where I heard that, but it's true.
Be aware as you stare into the abyss, because the abyss may be looking back, is the quote that I can remember.
Yeah. Well, you got the attention of the abyss, that's for sure. All right. And then you have this fantastic case of this bizarre thing that is similar to some cases that I worked on several years ago, which is just highly unusual, a UFO shape. So tell us about that one.
Are you talking about the Whiteman sphere?
Yes.
Okay, this is a very odd case, and it's a very detailed and compelling case. So if you've ever heard of Rendlesham Forest, this is going to bring back some memories. And Rendlesham Forest happened in December of 1980, about 4 years prior to the case I'm going to talk about. So at Whiteman Air Force Base in October of 1984, there was a airman first class, and he consented to have his name released. So Airman First Class Hogan was stationed at Whiteman Air Force Base, and at the time it had been inactivated following World War II, and it was used to store Minuteman missiles and warheads. And so he was an air policeman there, and on a patrol with his partner about 1 a.m. They were out in a Jeep, and they were near some bunkers, and he said he knew that these bunkers contained these nuclear warheads, and they were being stored there. And so as they were driving around in the Jeep started to conk out on them. The engine would stall, and it just, they couldn't get it started. They would shut it off. About 10 minutes later, they could get it started. And the radios started to operate very intermittently. And he was trying to talk to his supervisor. He couldn't really get anybody on the radio. And so finally he gets his supervisor on the radio, and they said, okay, well, park next to this bunker, and we'll see if we can get somebody to come check out the vehicle. So they parked the vehicle, and he decided that he was going to write a letter to his girlfriend while they were sitting in this Jeep. So Airman First Class, let's see, George, Airman First Class George was his senior of the two, and he was the driver of the Jeep. So George was sitting there trying to get the Jeep running, and so Hogan takes down a pen, and he starts writing this letter, and he said he started to feel nauseous and maybe kind of high or drunk, and he didn't know what was going on. He saw the hair on his arms start to stand up and the hair on his head, and he looked over at George, and the same thing was happening. He said George had more hair than he did, and George's hair was just standing straight up, and they both talked about feeling weird. And so Hogan stops writing the letter, and he takes his pen and he puts it up in the visor. And he said, as he sat there for a minute, he watched the pen slide out of the visor, and it gradually floated down to the floor of the Jeep like it was a feather. And he thought he was hallucinating. He said, I got to get out. I got to get some air. He got out of the Jeep, and as soon as he got out of the Jeep, he looked up, and he saw this large black sphere that was blocking out the stars from behind. And he said it was completely round and spherical. There were no lights anywhere on it. And it was about 30 to 50 feet in diameter and about 500 to 1,000 feet above him. And that's pretty low. And that's a big object to be that low. So he said he could very clearly see it. And he said as he watched it, it fired this red beam, a bluish red beam, directly down from the sphere into the top of the bunker right by where they were parked. And this beam started to move around real rapidly. And he said it looked like the dot matrix head on a computer printer, like moving in a very predictable pattern. And so he got out, and he decided that he was going to climb up on top of this earthen bunker to check it out. So he had an M16 with an M203 grenade launcher attached to it. He locked and loaded his weapons. So he had a grenade in the tube. He had a magazine in his M16. He goes up on top of this bunker, and right next to him, he said he watched this beam on the grass. So the earthen bunker had grass growing on it, guarding the concrete hardened bunker, which was underground. So as he watched this beam, he said he was very curious on what it was doing. And so what do you think he did? He stuck his hand in it.
Yeah.
So he said, I had to know what it was doing. And I was really surprised what he told me. But he said he stuck his hand in this beam, and it immediately stopped, and the light turned to purple, and it just stayed stationary between his finger and his thumb. And his whole hand and arm immediately went to sleep. And he said that afterwards, for about the next 3 days, that persisted. And he didn't gain sensation for a couple of days later. So he jerked his hand back from it. The beam turned back to red, and it continued to go to these different bunkers. And according to Hogan, there were only 3 of these bunkers that had nuclear warheads in them, and he knew which bunkers they were. And the object was only concerned of the 24 bunkers or so that were there. The object was only concerned about the 3 that had nuclear warheads in them.
So somehow it knew.
Somehow it knew. And so he came back down to the Jeep, and George had been yelling at him, "Don't go up there, get back down here." And he just wasn't having any of it. They were able to get a supervisor on the radio. A boss came out, and he described this person as the UFO officer. He said every base has a UFO officer. Now, whether that's the case or not, I don't know. But it was either a major or a lieutenant colonel, because in the dark, he could see the rank on his uniform, the shape of the rank. And he said it was either a major or a lieutenant colonel. And he came out with another pickup truck following his sedan. And in the pickup truck, there was a trailer and a crew of other cameramen. They stopped this trailer. They lowered the sides on this trailer, and there was a huge camera mounted on a tripod. And he said the lens on this thing must have been 15 inches long and a huge diameter lens. And the major starts giving directions to these airmen to film this object. And meanwhile, George is asking for permission to engage the object. It's really close to him. He said, I got a round in the tube, sir. Permission to fire. Permission denied. You will not fire at that object. And he said, I got a clear shot. It's close. He said, Airmen, you do not know what you're dealing with. You do not have the power or the potential that they have. And he said, you will not engage that object. You will unload your weapon, and you will go behind that wall and sit down and don't pay attention to what we're doing over here.
Sounds like that UFO officer knew what he was dealing with.
He knew something. They had this camera mounted on the trailer already. And George said that when these vehicles came out onto the flight line, there was a major breach in protocol because there were two gates that were there. And the protocol was the first gate would open, the vehicles would be allowed to come in, the gate gets closed, they get inspected, their credentials and all that kind of stuff. And then the second gate is open to allow them to pass through. And he's that because there's nukes in this site, and that's just the protocol every single time. And he said this time both of those gates were wide open, and both of these vehicles came flying across. He said they were probably going 80 miles an hour coming across the runway to his location. And so that really struck him that was a major breach. So there was something that was unusual, and there were the permissions that officer had, the equipment that he had on the vehicle, and the things that he said. He clearly, this wasn't his first rodeo. And he did say when Hogan pointed the object out to him, oh my God, this is the first time I've ever seen one. I never thought that I would see one. I wish I had a camera. This is the first time I've ever seen one. And then he goes back to directing the guys on the truck. So,
wow.
There were also a couple of Harrier aircraft that were on the airfield, and they heard these Harriers fire up their engines. So a Harrier, it's commonly called the jump jet. It's a vertical takeoff jet. It can point the nozzles down where it can take off and hover and perform, and then it can rotate the nozzles back in for normal flight of a jet. So
that's quite impressive.
Yeah, they're very incredible aircraft. So they heard these three Harriers take off. They saw them take off from the runway, and they started trying to catch the object. And he said they flew around after that object for about a half an hour. They could never catch it. The object is making these very abrupt 90-degree turns very fast, from dead stop to speed to stop. And these Harriers are sweeping turns with their jets, and they're trying to catch it, and they really never could. So they came back and landed, and there's a lot more to the story. I don't know how much you want me to get into the men in gray suits. They're not men in black, but there were men in gray suits that landed in a plane, and he was interrogated and forced to sign a non-disclosure statement. It's a very interesting case.
Yeah, I would say so. And it really caught my eye because I worked a case over Lake City Army ammo plant. Actually, 3 cases that involved spheres of various sizes and shapes hovering over the plant. And I think the most impressive one was 1969, when a gigantic sphere, at least 60 feet in diameter, it was silver, floated over each building at very, very, very slow pace. It knocked out all of the electricity on the plant. And so all the lights went out. People went outside to get out of the heat. And then they're looking up and they see the sphere over their building. And then it slowly moved to the other buildings, and like it was observing each one of them. And that's just very similar to this case, because it looked like it was looking for something or scanning or something like that. There was no laser involved with this one, but it just catches my attention when I hear a sphere, because there have been a number of sphere cases that here is an object that can fly with no visible means of propulsion. There's something to do with anti-gravity because of that floating pin, obviously. Anything near that object probably had the same type of field, whatever that field is that they were in. Do you think, and we've got about 3 more minutes here, did these men have any residual long-term health effects after this?
He had some lingering problems. He told me that he still had a mark on his hand where this beam had struck him, and I asked him to send me a photo, but he has not done that yet. Honestly, I think he really has some issues from this, some PTSD type issues. The interrogation that he went through, he was threatened with death for him and his family. He took that very hard. He's been divorced several times. I could tell by talking to him. But I will fast forward to the end that after this whole incident occurred, a couple days later, he saw a detail up on top of these mounds with 55-gallon drums with a radioactive logo on the drums, and they were in hazmat suits with Geiger counters, shoveling soil into these 55-gallon drums. And then a couple of days after that, he talked to another airman who was a technician that worked on these warheads. And he said, well, what are you doing? He says, well, whatever you're doing, whatever happened out at the bunker where you were, the circuitry in these warheads were fried, and they all have to be repaired before they can be operational again. So all those warheads in those bunkers were damaged from that encounter.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that's not the first time we've heard that, because I believe that the UFOs have been sighted over every single facility that has nuclear in the world at some time or another. Obviously, whatever or whoever these things are, they're very interested in nuclear weapons and nuclear arsenals, and the ammunitions. Munitions.
I don't know if it is the weapon itself or nuclear as a propulsion system, or what it is about nuclear. Maybe it's both. But we know, like you said, they're over military bases, very common over nuclear reactors. But there are nuclear reactors on aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines and vehicles that we use, large vehicles in the inventory, and around volcanoes and large bodies of water for whatever reason. Just a very, very common sighting locations.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Ray, time is up for this evening. I'm sorry to say, but thank you so much for sharing that case and your sighting and your investigation at Skinwalker. The Skinwalker Ranch was the only reason that I knew about 1.6 gigahertz. And so, now we all have spectrum analyzers, don't we?
Yeah, that's right.
They come in handy too. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with me this evening, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. Thank you, Ray. Oh my gosh, there is so much going on in ufology right now. I'm hardly getting any sleep trying to keep track of all of this that's happening. But yeah, keep your eyes to the sky. And you know what? Since all this activity is going on, it's a good time to take your camera and go outside and sit in the cold for a few minutes and see what you see. If you get some video, send it to me, and we'll get it on the show. Thanks so much, and see you again here next week.